Russia has changed a lot in the last 30 years. The first time I visited Moscow was when the Russians were still standing in an hour-long queues at the McDonald's. That was in 1992. They watched action movies like Boyoviki with Van Damme and others, and exchanged videotapes with a hopelessly poor dubbing. They loved America and dreamed of sending their children to British universities. In the 90s, the West was magical to them, and they all were happy to be part of it. I lived in the former Soviet Union from 1993 to 2003. I visited Moscow many times. We were all great friends. Their homes were open and their minds were as well. When Putin became president in 2000, things in the region began to change, though not at the beginning. He tried to make friends with the West. He even hired an American PR firm to work on his public image. But it was not his style. A shirt and tie, long political debates, and new technologies just did not suit him. He was a real Russian, strong, provocative, and just Russian. He quickly gained popularity against the growing group of the westernized, so-called New Russians. And there was a war in the Caucasus in the 1990s, which was very inconvenient for Putin. The West's support for Chechen fighters angered him, and he did not feel comfortable when others interfered in what he believed to be Russian territory. The turning point for the Putin's role came at the largest terrorist attack in Europe. Do you know what am I talking about? May not. It happened on the 1st of September 2004 at the school in Beslan in the Russian Federation. Since that day, the Kremlin started to speak a different language, with pride and isolation, with contempt for the Western values. I remember Putin's words well. When the mothers in Beslan were still crying and the world was still in shock with pictures from the school number 1 in Beslan, Putin said, "Russia is weak, and that's why everyone is punching us." Later, in 2004, Putin deceived us. He deceived the West using the PS1 terrorist attack. He used a small town for his vile plan to consolidate his rule and open the way to confrontation of powers in the region. The West turned its back on the Caucasus fighters, they stopped supporting them, and allowed Putin to start its own war on international terrorism. It was a cover of lies, because he was the real terrorist. The people of Beslan knew about it. There were lawsuits in 150 courts in Russia that asked to be heard, but nobody wanted to know their truth, because the Kremlin had their own story. Today, the same Kremlin would like the world to believe the Ukrainians are like the Nazis, just as Beslan was said to be Islamic terrorist. When I watched news from Ukraine these days, I know I have seen this story before, but in a much smaller scale. I am an author of a book called The Shattered Town, about the terrorist attack in Beslan. My book was published and became very successful in Poland in 2014. I translated my book into Russian a few years ago, but I haven't found a publisher in Russia who will to print it. They told me, "We don't need books like that in Russia. Russians don't read stories like that." Another publisher told me they had printed a book on Beslan, but had just sold 5,000 copies in the country of 150 million. It's not a business, they said. I've concluded that Russians don't want to know the truth. They see what is happening now in Ukraine, but they do not see the war. There are no victims, they say. I was in Beslan in 2004 and I visited over 100 families. I saw many wounded children, destroyed school number 1, and a cemetery with more than 300 graves. It's called the City of Angels. I spoke with many witnesses who told me what had happened to them and their city. And I was in Kharkiv 6 months ago, and Odessa and Kiev in Ukraine. Some of my Ukrainian friends there are now fighting, others hiding in the basements. They send me pictures. But Putin is telling his lies in front of millions, that there is no war, there is no terror. I would like for you to have a chance to read my story told by the Beslan people and see how all of this started in Russia. Please consider helping me publish this story of Beslan in English and other languages. Please consider contributing to the translation and editor's work. If you are a publisher, please contact me and I will send you 2 chapters of my book in English. Thank you very much.